to Rizal to volunteer his services to the Spanish government and join the forces as physician in Cuba. Learning that revolution broke out and there was a raging yellow fever epidemic and physicians to the needs of the Spanish troops was in shortage. Blumentritt recommended to Rizal a legal opportunity to end his exile. As a result, Rizal wrote a letter to Governor-General Ramon Blanco. However, months passed by and he received no response until he gave up the idea. However, on July 30, 1896, he received a letter from the Governor-General accepting his offer to volunteer as physician. Also, written in the letter was a notice to the politico-military commander of the Pitan to give Rizal a pass so he could return to Manila. From Manila, he was to get transferred to a steamer bound to Spain and eventually to Cuba. Consequently, Rizal sold his lands and other belongings on July 31 and bade farewell to the people of the Pitan. He was accompanied by Josephine Narcisa, Angelica Narcisa's daughter, 3 sons of Maria and 2 sons of Lucia, on board of the steamer España who reached Manila on August 6, 1896. And also, at the same time to give Rizal a pass so that he could come to Manila, where he would be given a safe conduct to Spain and his medical operation in Cuba. In additional, we also talk about the outbreak of the Philippine Revolution took place. The Philippine Revolution began in August 1896 when the Spanish authorities discovered the Katipunan, an anti-colonial secret organizations. The Katipunan led by Andres Bonifacio began to influence much of the Philippines, taking full advantage of Spanish failures against Cuban nationalists in 1895 and declaring Spain a weakened empire. During that mass gathering in Caloocan, the leaders of the Katipunan organized into a revolutionary government, namely the newly established government Haring Bayang Katalugan, and openly declared a nationwide armed revolution. Also, Bonifacio called for an attack on the capital city of Manila. Nevertheless, this attack failed. The surrounding provinces began to revolt. In particular, rebels in Cavite, led by Mariano Alvarez and Baldomero Aguinaldo, who were leaders from 2 different factions of the Katipunan, won early major victories. A power struggle among the revolutionaries led to schism among Katipunan leadership, followed by Bonifacio's execution in 1897. With this command having shifted to Emilio Aguinaldo, who led the newly formed revolutionary government, that year revolutionaries and Spanish signed the Pact of Biak na Bato, which temporarily reduced hostilities. Filipino revolutionaries offers exiled themselves to Hong Kong. However, the hostilities never completely ceased.
The Travels of Rizal. Disillusioned with how Filipinos in the Philippines were regarded as second-class citizens in the institution of learning and elsewhere, the national hero, Jose Rizal, left the country in May 1882 to pursue further studies abroad. He enrolled in a course in medicine at the Universidad Central de Madrid in Spain. In June 1883, he traveled to France to observe how medicine was being practiced there. After his 3 month sojourn in France, Rizal returned to Madrid and thought about publishing a book that exposed the colonial relationship of Spain and the Philippines. This idea was realized in March 1887 with the publication of the novel Noli Me Tangere in Germany. Rizal was actively involved in the propaganda movement composed of Filipinos in Spain who sought to direct the attention of Spaniards to the concerns of Spanish colony in the Philippines. He wrote articles for publication in Manila abroad, convened with the Filipino overseas to discuss their duty to the country, called the Spanish authorities to institute reforms in Philippines, such as granting freedom of the press and Filipino representation in Spanish Corte. Rizal returned to Manila in August 1887 after 5 years in Europe. However, his homecoming was met by prayers for over Noli Me Tangere. The Archbishop of Manila issued an order banning the position and reading of novel, an order that was later enforced by the government general. 6 months later, pressured by the Spanish authorities as well as by his family and friends to leave the country and avoid further persecution, Rizal left Manila for Hong Kong. From Hong Kong, Rizal traveled to Macau and Japan before going to America, entering San Francisco, California in April 1888. He visited the states of Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Nebraska, Illinois, and New York. He jotted down his observation of the landscape in his diary. Rizal arrived in England in May 1888. In August, he was admitted to the British Museum where he copied Antonio de Morga's massive study of the Philippines, Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, which Rizal later annotated for publication as a gift to the Filipinos. In the museum, he devoted his time reading all the sources on Philippine history that he could find. He kept up his correspondence with various Filipino, including his family, who were obsessed by the Spanish religious landowners at Filipino patriots in Spain, and his Australian friend Ferdinand Bloomerit, with whom he planned form as Association of the Philippine Scholars.
Rizal back for trial. On December 6, 1896, the trial of Dr. Jose Rizal by a Spanish military court for sedition, rebellion, and conspiracy began. This led to his execution and martyrdom. Rizal, who was imprisoned first in Barcelona and later in Fort Santiago, was implicated in the revolution which was launched in August 1896 by the Katipunan led by Andres Bonifacio, whose aim was to liberate the country for Spanish colonization. After the time of his arrest, Rizal was supposed to leave for Cuba after he was allowed by Spanish Governor General Ramon Blanco, who was sympathetic to him, to serve a military sergeant in Cuba, where there was also a revolution against Spain. Before he left from his exile in the Pitan for Manila and then for Spain, Rizal had issued a manifesto disavowing the revolution and declaring that the education of Filipinos and their achievement of a national identity were prerequisite to freedom. Rizal was arrested while en route to Spain, imprisoned in Barcelona, and sent back later to Manila to stand trial. He was charged with being traitor to Spain and the mastermind of the revolution. He pleaded his innocence, but he was still convicted on all three charges of rebellion, sedition, and conspiracy, and sentenced of death. Earlier, Rizal was already considered as an enemy of the state by the Spanish authorities with the publication of his two great novels, Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo. Thus, Rizal was executed on December 30, 1896 in Bagumbayan, Luneta, which has been renamed Rizal Park in his memory.
The Court-Martial of Rizal. December 26, 1896, the Court-Martial of Rizal started in the military building called Cuartel de España in Fort Santiago. He was charged with three crimes: rebellion, sedition, and illegal association. Lieutenant Enrique de Alcocer, a prosecuting lawyer, enumerated the charges against Rizal. He persuaded the members of military court to punish and accuse with death sentence to Rizal. Lieutenant Taviel de Andrade, a defense counsel of Rizal delivered his well-expressed defense of Rizal, and he brought an end to his defense by reminding to the judges to be fair and avoid vindictiveness in their judgment. But his admonition was just ignored by the court. Rizal read his supplementary defenses when the court asked him if he wanted to say anything to defend himself. After giving Rizal an opportunity to speak in his defense, the court, after deliberations, rendered its decision, finding Rizal the author of rebellion and sentenced him to death. The council dictated the sentence to Rizal. The court judged Rizal guilty for the crime charged and voted for the death penalty. December 26, 1896, the court decision was submitted to Governor General Polavieja. By virtue of its powers, the council dictates the following sentence: Dr. Rizal should be and is hereby condemned to death. On the 20th day of December, Governor General Polavieja approved the sentence of the Council of War after knowing that none of the members of the Council of Authorities recommended any commutation of the sentence against Rizal. And he signed Rizal's death warrant ordering him to be shot at 7 o'clock in the morning of December 30 at Bagumbayan.
He was executed by the Spanish colonial government for the crime of rebellion after the Philippines Revolution, inspired in part by his writings, broke out, though he was not actively involved in its planning or conduct. He ultimately approved of its goal, which eventually led to Philippine independence. At his execution, Rizal made two requests to the commander of the firing squad. His first request that the firing squad spare his head from being shot. Previous condemned people who were executed by firing squad were shot at the back of the head, and some were shot while they were kneeling. His request was granted by the commander of the firing squad. Rizal's second request that he be shot through the heart while facing the firing squad. This request was denied. Rizal protested, saying he was not a traitor to Spain. In the execution of traitor by firing squad, the condemned were shot in the back. The commander said that his order were to have him shot in the back, as this was what the Spaniard wanted to happen. Rizal calmly accepted his fate. The last and final word of Rizal is,
Consumatum est! Bilang Jose Protasio Rizal Mercado y Alonso Rialonda, ang pambansang bayani ng Pilipinas,